Hi, I'm Sabina Sabat. I'm a classics and theater major in the class of 2022, and today I'm going to be discussing memento mori in Roman cooking. So, mementos mori, or reminders to be mindful of death, are ever present in Roman convivial images. We have mosaics and frescoes of banquets or convivial scenes with skeletons and skulls depicted. There are cups that would be used in convivial settings, silver drinking cups, for instance, decorated with images of the celebrated dead. The converse, too, is true. Funerary altars and catacombs are covered in images of conviviality and banqueting. All evidence, archaeological and literary, suggests that Roman conviviality was centered around life in the moment. These mementos mori served as reminders to guests that death is inevitable, and we must eat, drink, and be merry while we still can. I will argue that these themes, the inevitability of death and necessity to embrace life, are present in Roman convivial and luxury cooking as well. This presents itself in two ways, as celebrations of life and as reminders of death. The former includes the use of eggs, testicles, wombs, figs, apples, pears, and other fruits as symbols of birth, fertility, and rebirth. The latter includes mushrooms, as mushrooms can only exist through death and decomposition, and beans, which ancient Romans believed may contain the souls of the dead. Regardless of whether a food is a symbol of life or of death, they're ultimately a reminder of both. These foods serve as mementos mori because they remind Roman diners to embrace the joy of the current moment in life. A memento mori is first and foremost an artistic trope. The Roman art that surrounds the dining place is a popular space for these mementos mori, though more unusual spaces such as tables, chairs, and cups are all also common. All of these depictions, however, serve the same purpose. This figure, which would be the floor decoration of a Roman triclinium, depicts a skeleton exhorting his diners to enjoy their banqueting, because soon they will die. The opposite appears as well. Images of the banquet in Roman tombs and sarcophagi, as we see in this image, are quite frequent, which demonstrates how closely the Roman concepts of food and death are related. The image is a stele, depicting a woman reclining as if she were at a convivium and drinking. The convivial imagery on a funerary monument, instead of reminding us that we will die, reminds us that now we are still alive. Ultimately, the message, that we should enjoy what we have while we have it, is the same, but the chosen motif of banquets appearing on sarcophagi, in tombs, and on stelae is compelling because it demonstrates that the Roman thought of festivity and death are two sides of the same coin. This demonstrates that convivial dining most closely resembles a polar opposite of death as the most vivid representation of what it is to be alive. This philosophical idea, the meaning of life and the use of living it, lends itself to depictions like this one, a silver cup that is part of the so-called Boscaril treasure, which would have been displayed as part of the convivial atmosphere, if not actually used to drink in that convivial setting. The cup shows skeletons labeled as philosophers Epicurus and Zeno. A Greek inscription between them reads that the purpose is pleasure, implying that there is no meaning to life beyond what we enjoy. But a memento mori can be far more subtle than a skeleton. Roman triclinia also depicted images of food as mementos mori. This figure's skeleton is reclining and eating a loaf of bread, but the physical act of eating appears rarely. Food still lifes, however, are much more common, and often depict foods that are related to birth, death, and rebirth. This image, for instance, shows both pears and pomegranates. Pears, figs, and other fruits, aside from being pleasing to the eye, are symbols of birth and fertility. Pomegranates are reminiscent of Persephone, whose movement between the world of the living and the world of the dead embodies all three: her life in the world above, her metaphorical death when she makes her catabasis, and her rebirth when she returns. Mosaics and frescoes depict things that Romans would enjoy being surrounded by, including images of the foods they would legitimately eat in a convivial setting. When we view these images, we can see the banquet itself while still in progress. These artworks would also serve as topics of conversation and showpieces, so we can imagine that death and dying was a topic of discussion in the elite Roman convivial world. Those symbols, when incorporated into pieces of art, become part of culture and then inseparable from life. In Roman literature, another form of this art, we can find exaggerated versions of Roman life. Petronius' Satyricon, for instance, is famous for its spectacular and highly exaggerated banqueting, as Petronius aims to make a mock of the upper-class Roman elite. But through Trimalchio, his banquet's host, Petronius also comments on Roman views of death. The note on which Trimalchio's banquet begins is death, and he closes with the ultimate memento mori, a funeral. In his entertainment, too, he is fixated on death, himself delivering this poem: "Nothing but bones, that's what we are, death hustles us humans away. Today we're here and tomorrow we're not, so live and drink while you may." How would a man so obsessed with death feast his banqueters? Of course they must consume their memento mori. Their gustatio, the zodiac plate, contains a pair of testicles and kidneys and a virgin sow belly. One half is procreation, the other gestation. Both together create life, and the guests view and consume life eagerly. Consuming life, what used to be alive or what symbolizes life, serves as a metaphor for living. Petronius' focus on death, in a work of satire, makes clear that the focus was present in the lives of wealthy Romans. Though not nearly as liberally as Trimalchio, they did use memento mori. They must have feasted, too, then, on mementos mori. Domitian certainly made the banqueters at his famous Black Banquet remember to live while they could. The food and drink was reminiscent of sacrifice, and the guests, all Roman senators, departed in terror, fearing the safety of their lives. According to Dio Cassius, guests feasted on all the things that were commonly offered at sacrifices and drank libations. Domitian's senatorial convivium makes living banqueters the recipient of libations and sacrificial foods, while maintaining its integrity as a banquet for the living. So it seems that any food can be a reminder to be mindful of death in the right setting. While records of fantastical emperor-sanctioned banquets and satiric feasts thrown by death-obsessed spendthrifts serve some purpose for the argument that Roman luxury cooking included mementos mori, life and art only imitate one another so closely. The best account of Roman convivial cooking we have is the Roman cookbook known as Apicius de Re Coquinaria. Apicius' collection consists of 459 recipes divided into 10 parts, and these recipes span an incredible range from the common to the extraordinary. 15.5 of his total recipes include what can be considered as mementos mori, from mushrooms and beans to eggs, udders, and wombs. I am particularly interested in his 7th section, what Grockock translates as luxury dishes. These are the more extravagant and more costly dishes that would most likely be served only in convivial settings, where mementos mori serve their greatest purpose. And within this section, the percentage of dishes containing subtle reminders of birth, death, and rebirth is significantly higher, 41.5%. Apicius' luxury dishes include such delicacies as sterile wombs, udders, testicles, mushrooms, truffles, and eggs. Sterile wombs are not only presumably more tender than those wombs that have carried children. While wombs are a symbol of birth and fertility and life, the wombs meant for consumption draw attention to that function because they have not performed it. On the other side of that coin, testicles serve the function of begetting. When one consumes what is meant to create, we throw the order of life to the wind. Similarly, too, with udders, meant to nurse a creature that had just been born, and eggs, which are creatures that could have been born. Mushrooms and truffles, on the other hand, symbolize death and decay. Fungus can only thrive where a decaying organism lays, whether plant or animal. The consumption of fungus is a knowing nod to the renewal of life from something that has died, and therefore an acknowledgement both that mortality is inescapable and that mortality is good, because death gives birth to new and different life. Mementos mori appear as a motif in Roman art, literature, and history. We see the fresco and the cup, Petronius' Trimalchio, Domitian's Black Banquet. The living and feasting appear in funerary contexts too, the stele being just one example. The fact that these reminders are all connected by food shows that Romans knew these two truths. 1, that food is life, and 2, that when you are alive, you will die. When then Roman recipes like the ones in Apicius de Re Coquinaria demonstrate a trend toward using and consuming the opposites of procreation and expiration, it makes sense that these foods are being used intentionally. Apicius' liberal use of life-giving foods, testicles, wombs, udders, eggs, and fruits, as well as death and rebirth foods, mushrooms, truffles, and beans, particularly in his section on luxury dishes, exhibits a clear knowledge and intention. We can view a memento mori, we can drink from one, we can behold its opposite in funerary depictions of banquets. But what better reminder that we will die could there be than to dine on something life-giving or death-consuming? The foods that commonly symbolize life, death, rebirth, fertility, and decay become a knowing wink to the skeleton within all of us when consumed in a banquet setting. Roman convivial cooking is the perfect place for memento mori, considering that convivial spaces are the spaces in which people are most alive. And who else are reminders to be mindful of death for, if not for the alive? So remember that we will all die, and enjoy life while you have it. Thank you.